Thank you for bearing with us. It's a big crowd, and we know that some of you were waiting for a while, but thank you very much. It's great to see such a well-attended event. My name is Paul Gross. I'm a senior fellow here at the Centre, and I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion, and we're looking forward to hearing from an amazing panel of guests. For those of you new to the Centre, as part of the programming that we do here, we hold a number of events in English that are in keeping with the mission of the Begin Centre as an institution to preserve and honour the legacy of Israel's sixth Prime Minister, Menachem Begin. We hold book launches and lectures, documentaries, discussions, and all connected in some way to Begin's principles of the unity of the Jewish people, the integrity of the homeland, democracy and the rule of law, and most relevant for tonight's event, the sacred task of defending and securing the Jewish state and the Jewish people. Earlier this week, some of you will have seen on the news, or if you one of the mailing lists that I'm sure you're all subscribed to, Prime Minister Netanyahu was in Berlin at a press conference with Angela Merkel, and he spoke primarily about Iran and the JCPOA, the Iran deal, which, as we know, the United States has recently withdrawn from. And I want to just comment on something he said, which I think has a bearing on the issues that we're going to discuss this evening. One of the biggest flaws in the JCPOA, he said, was that it ended the sanctions regime, which had pushed Iran to the brink of economic disaster. And he explained that the ending of the sanctions, as a result of the deal, has energized the Iranian economy, but the money is not going to the Iranian people, rather it's going to the war in Yemen, to the contribution to Assad slaughtering of thousands of his own people in Syria, and of course funding Hezbollah and Hamas. And he said that sanctions were needed to quote, I quote from him, break this cash machine that feeds the Iranian empire that endangers everybody. And when we think about security and counterterrorism, money is not the first element that comes to mind. It's military operations, covert ops, espionage. I don't know, does anyone watch Fowler? Okay, so you'll have some, you can let your imaginations go wild on what counterterrorism involves. But what we learned from this remarkable book from Harpoon is that there's really an incredible story to be told about going after the money, about the funding for groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, and the enormous impact that the Mossad can make just by doing that on their operational capability and effectiveness. And we're going to hear from Nitsana, Darshan, Leitner in her panel further on this, on exactly what happened and the details. Before I invite her up to speak, I want to pay tribute to her and to what she's achieved with Shurat Hadin. Over the past 12 plus years, Nitsana has become the undisputed leader of the fight against Palestinian and Islamic terrorist organizations in the courtroom. She's a graduate of the Bar-Ilan University Law Faculty, where she was recently honored. She holds an MBA from Manchester University. She was named by the Jerusalem Post as one of the 50 most influential Jews in 2014, and by the Allgemeine as one of the top 10 living Jewish women role models in 2015, and presumably still now in 2015. She was awarded the Moscowitz Prize for Zionism in 2012, given recognition of individuals who take personal responsibility by placing the collective needs of the Jewish people before their personal needs. She's led and won a number of major legal cases against terror organizations, resulting in more than $2 billion in judgments. Think about that, $2 billion, that's pretty amazing, and collecting $200 million in compensation for victims of terror. Nitsana, what you're doing is truly heroic, and as a permanently tired father of twin babies, I'm even more impressed when I learn that you have 6 children, including triplets. So even more heroic than previously thought. You and your staff at Shurat Hadin are making a really unique contribution to what I think is the global battle of our age, the fight against Islamist terror, and really extraordinary work you're doing. Please welcome Nitsana Darshan.
Hi, good evening. I'm going to start with talking about Harpoon, the book that became bestseller, national bestseller, #3 on the LA Times. And I would start in 1996. It was 3 years into the Oslo Accords. We Israelis were promised peace. We were promised that this will bring a halt to terrorism, that the PLO will not carry out any more terror attacks, that Yasser Arafat will become Baal Tshuva. But instead, we got bloodshed. Suicide bombing, drive-by shooting, ambushes, people getting killed on a daily basis on the street of Tel Aviv, of Jerusalem, and there was no end in sight. The former legendary head of the Mossad, Meir Dagan, who is one of the main characters in the book, was the counterterrorism advisor for the Prime Minister at the time. Meir Dagan was watching all this wave of terrorism and was looking for ways to stop them. But he was very frustrated because he saw that whereas the IDF cares about every single soldier that risks his life, and the state of Israel cares about innocent people that might get killed, the other side, the terror organizations, don't care about their own people's life. As a matter of fact, they rush them and push them to get killed. That was an asymmetrical war, and he wanted to bridge this gap. So he was looking for ways to fight this terrorism in a non-violent way, in a way that will not risk life of the IDF soldiers. And he was seeing and detecting something that people did not see. He did not really look at the one that was wearing explosive vests and blowing himself up. He did not see just the one who was holding an up and stabbing passengers. He did not see the one who was carrying a machine gun and shooting towards the people. He saw an industry. He saw terrorists teaming up in an organized fashion, supported by communities, the local communities in the West Bank and Gaza and around the entire world. And he saw money coming in, people holding suitcases with cash, banks wire millions of dollars to the hands of the terror organizations, and all this money fanning the flame behind the terrorism, and he realized that he must fight the terror financing. That if he wants to stop this flow of terrorism, he must stop the flow of the money. So he went to back then Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Yes, he was the Prime Minister back then as well. And asked him to form a task force that its only goal will be to fight terror financing. It will include representatives from Shin Bet, from the Mossad, from the intelligence, from the foreign ministry, from the treasury, and they will sit down and brainstorm and come up with ways to fight the money and to block it, not to reach the hands of the terrorists. Netanyahu agreed, and they established Harpoon. Harpoon was, until now, the secret unit in the Mossad that fought terror financing, and they had one goal. Follow the money, target the money, kill the money. Money was the obstacle to the terrorism, and they were determined to choke it off. In 2002, Meir Dagan was elevated to become the head of the Mossad by his best friend, former mentor and commander, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. 2002 was the peak of the Intifada, especially the months of March and April. The Dolphin Arrow discotheque in Tel Aviv, 28 teenagers getting killed, the Moen Cafe in Jerusalem, 18 young people get killed, Park Hotel in Nitsana, 30 guests over Passover Seder getting massacred. So Ariel Sharon called Meir Dagan to look for ways to block these attacks. Now the one who's in charge in Israel for the interior security affairs is a Shin Bet. And yet, Ariel Sharon called Meir Dagan to find a way. Because he knew that if he needs to find creative, innovative, new ways, it will be Meir Dagan that will come up with them. He knew Meir Dagan's story. Meir Dagan was born in 1945 on a train when his parents tried to escape from Ukraine to Russia. They lived in Siberia for 5 years and then they made Aliyah to Israel. As soon as he got to Israel, Meir Dagan wanted to become an Israeli. He wanted to be a Sabra, but he wasn't able to. He didn't know Hebrew. The little he knew, he spoke in a very heavy accent. The family was very poor, was living in an outskirt neighborhood of Tel Aviv in Bat Yam. But yet, Meir Dagan wanted to win. So when he became 18 and was drafted to the military, he wanted to join the most elite unit at the time, Sayeret Matkal. Sayeret Matkal was the one who raided Entebbe, that Yoram Netanyahu got killed, Benjamin Netanyahu served there, Ehud Barak served there, but he wasn't able to. At the time, in the end of the 60s, the children that were drafted to Sayeret Matkal were the children of the families of the establishment, those who built up the country, the families of the kibbutzim. Meir Dagan was not born to the right family with the right connections or the right accents. So he was drafted to the paratroops. And yet, he wanted to win. When he went to Gaza, it was his first mission. His commander was Ariel Sharon, the southern commander, and he got a mission to dismantle all the terrorists. Gaza, after the 6-day war, was the Wild West. So Meir Dagan wanted to prove himself. When he came to Gaza, there were 850 wanted terrorists. When he left, there were only 9 remaining. And he did it in the most creative way. One day, for instance, he dressed up as a Palestinian, took his crew, his soldiers dressed up as Palestinians as well, went to the shore of Gaza in a boat, and demanded to see the local commander of the terror cell. The terror cell's commander came before him, and Meir Dagan told him that he is the commander of the same cell from South Lebanon, that he came all the way from Lebanon because the rumor was spread that the local commander in Gaza collaborates with Israel, that he became an ally of Israel and told them secrets. He was telling him that he came all the way to put him on trial, and if he finds him guilty, he will execute him. The local commander was so afraid, he was shivering. He started telling Meir Dagan the names of all his co-commanders and soldiers, urging Meir Dagan to go and ask them if he ever collaborated with Israel, if he ever was an ally of Israel. He gave Meir Dagan all their names, where are at night, where are in day, addresses, phone numbers, anything that he needs in order to locate them. By the end of the week, everybody were either killed or arrested. So Ariel Sharon called Meir Dagan and asked him how to stop this wave of terrorism. And Meir Dagan told him his theory, which was very, very new to Ariel Sharon, to stop the terror funding. He told him, look, money is coming from Europe, from the United States, to the hands of the terrorists. Yasser Arafat is using this slush fund and funds all the terror attacks. Why don't you separate Yasser Arafat from his money? And Ariel Sharon, who wasn't a friend of Yasser Arafat, he never forgave Menachem Begin that he didn't let him kill Yasser Arafat when he cornered him one day in South Lebanon, adopted the idea, and give a go-ahead to Meir Dagan. Meir Dagan told Ariel Sharon, look, there are two ways to accomplish a mission. One above the table, the other one underneath the table. The one above the table is the right and the proper one. The one underneath the table is the one that will get the work done. He told him, let's use Harpoon. So they sent Harpoon agents to a country in South Lebanon, in South America, and opened an investment fund. They rented fancy offices in the most lucrative area of the town. They rented fancy furniture. They hired beautiful and young secretaries and opened an investment fund. And then they called Mohammed Rashid, who was the financial advisor of Yasser Arafat, to come and to learn about this new investment fund. And they told him when he came what type of interest he can get. Very high interest, what lucrative return he will get on his investment, what personal benefits he himself will get if he invests with this company. Mohammed Rashid, who usually was very cautious, left all caution behind and started investing with this company. And within a couple of months, he got such a high return, high interest as high as 30%, lucrative return, personal benefits. He didn't pull the money out, he went and invested more and more of Arafat's money into the company. And then one day, Mohammed Rashid made a random call to the company and nobody answered the phone. He went to the country in Latin America looking for the offices were gone, along with hundreds of millions of dollars of Arafat's money. In the book, I tell many of these stories. We're able to do it because we had a front row seat watching these operations of Harpoon and even take part in some of them. Shura Leitner was established in the beginning of the Intifada, when the blood was spilled on the streets of Tel Aviv. We were young lawyers and we decided to try and do exactly what Meir Dagan was doing with Harpoon. Block the terror funding. Fight terror financing. Go after what terrorists need most, money. So we filed lawsuits. It was in the beginning of the Intifada against Iran, Syria, against Hamas, Islamic Jihad, PLO, against the Palestinian Authority, in Israel and the United States. And after 2 years, we won judgments and decisions in our favor. We won a judgment for $180 million against Iran. We won a lien for 64 million shekels in Israel in the case of the 2 soldiers that were lynched in Ramallah. We got an unprecedented decision that you can sue the Palestinian Authority in Israel and the United States. And then we were approached by Harpoon to see if they can give us evidence, if we can use it to go after those who facilitate this terror financing. Those who without them the money would not go from the United States and Europe into the West Bank and Gaza. Go after the banks. We agreed, maybe to file a lawsuit because this is what we like to do. And we filed lawsuits against Arab banks, European banks, Chinese banks, Lebanese banks. Some of the cases have settled out of court. Some of them are still litigated in the federal courts in the United States. But the effect of this lawsuit was already made and had twofold. One is giving compensations to the terror victims. Ella Bukassis was only 17 years old when she was walking one day with her brother, 15 years old, coming back from Bnei Akiva in Sderot, when the red alert went off. This is the alarm that goes on when the missiles are falling from Gaza. Here in Jerusalem, you have 90 seconds to find a shelter. In Ashdod, you have 60 seconds to find a shelter. In Sderot, you have 15 seconds to find a shelter. So she was walking down the street, it was a bare street, there was no building, no basket to hide underneath them. So the only thing that went into her mind is to protect her brother. She fell over her brother, she covered him. The missile fell right near their heads. Many sharp nails went into their both heads. She fought for 7 days of her life in the hospital. She died. Her brother is disabled for life. We were asked if we can file a lawsuit against a major bank that provided financial services to Hamas at the time. We agreed, we filed the lawsuit in the federal court in New York, and we won. The father called me up, and he said, "Thank you for letting me fight back. Thank you for allowing me to get my integrity back. I feel I'm no longer a victim." And this is what these cases do. No money can bring back life, but money can bring a measure of closure, a measure of justice to the terror victims. The cases enable them to fight back. The other fall of these cases is the shockwave that these cases made for the international banking system, that no bank agreed anymore to open bank accounts to designated terror organizations or to provide financial services to Islamic charities that identify terror organizations or operate in terror zones like South Lebanon and Gaza. There is no banking system in Gaza. This is why we're seeing smuggling money into Gaza in cash, in suitcases, with money changers. But that's not enough for Hamas. Hamas budget stand today on $500 million, and they need every penny. They need to support the population. They need to provide them with services in order to use them as human shields, to push them to the fence, children and women, to infiltrate into Israel, walking just behind them. They need to support their soldiers. We saw some of them during the riots. Some of them wear uniforms, but most of the time don't. But they always get paid on a monthly basis. Hamas needs to support its prisoners in an Israeli jail, sitting between $300 to $5,000 to $3,000 a month. And Hamas needs to keep arming itself, bring missiles into Gaza, build their underground tunnels. To maintain all this structure, Hamas needs hundreds of millions of dollars. And we see just recently that they could not use munition anymore. It was too expensive. They're using their people to go and fight Israel. We have cases against state-sponsored terrorism. Every time Hamas, Islamic Jihad, or Hezbollah carrying out attacks against Israelis, we file a lawsuit against Iran, against Syria, and against North Korea. in the Federal District Court of Washington. We win these cases. These countries do not defend themselves. We get a judgment against them for hundreds of millions of dollars, and we don't stop there. We try to enforce each and every judgment we gain. It's against frozen bank accounts in the United States. It's against assets that belong to Iran, belong to North Korea, buildings, real estate. And even recently we filed a lien on the deal that Iran signed with Boeing to purchase 80 aircraft for $17 billion. We went to the court in Chicago. We filed a lien on the deal. Chicago is where Boeing has its headquarters. And we told the court, we have a judgment against Iran. We are entitled to the Iranian money that will go in this deal, or to the aircrafts. Boeing went to the court, said that if we continue with this lien, Iran might pull out of the deal, which will obstruct the nuclear agreement with Iran, the one that the nations and United States signed just recently. So the court went to the State Department and asked for their position, whether indeed it will harm national security assets of the United States. And the State Department, after a long consideration, came to court, filed a statement of interest, said that they recognize the rights of the victims to pursue justice, to enforce their judgments against these foreign states, and they are not going to intervene with this case. They allow us to go forward, and the case is going forward in the court. There was a very prominent family in Hebron, very respectful one, a big clan in Hebron, affiliated with Hamas, named the Glassman family. And during the winter of 2014, the Glassman family's 3 members sat down in one of them's living room and plotted how to help the Palestinian prisoners who are sitting in the Israeli jail. And after a long discussion, they realized that the only way they can help the Palestinian prisoners who are sitting in the Israeli jail is to go and kidnap an Israeli soldier and then to negotiate with the state of Israel to release Palestinian prisoners. In the end of the day, the Gilad Shalit's deal was a big success. So they decided to kidnap an Israeli soldier. And they had a plan. One of them will remain in the Hebron area looking for a place to hide the soldier. And the other 2 will go and purchase whatever is needed to carry out the kidnapping. To do that, they needed 2 cars. 1 car to kidnap the soldier, 1 car to switch the soldier to the new car to get rid of the old car, not to leave any trace of evidence. They also needed 2 M16s, because the soldier might be armed. And they needed 2 pistols in case something bad will go in the car. To purchase all of this, they needed 220,000 shekels. That's a huge amount of money in Hebron. So they approached a charity in Gaza called Al-Noor, a one that pays compensations to the families of the suicide bombers, a one that supports their families, and the one that supports all the terror attacks done by Hamas. They asked for 220,000 shekels, and the charity gave them. And they went and bought 2 cars, 2 M16s, and 2 pistols. And then it was June. The 2 terrorists went to Gush Etzion Junction on one Thursday night looking for a soldier. But it was late at night, it was a weekend, there were no soldiers. There were 3 teenagers that wanted to come back home. And the teenagers jumped into the car and caught the terrorists in the surprise because the terrorists did not expect 3 big young kids. After a phone call that one of them made to the police, they shot them. But they continued with the plan. They went and reached the new car. They switched the teenagers to the new car, burned the old car, and drove all the way to the shelter area near Hebron and buried the teenagers in the ground. An entire country held its breath until we found the boys. This Kawasma family had the same idea 20 years ago, but they couldn't carry it out because they didn't have the money. We represent the Frankel family in a lawsuit against Iran because it was done by Hamas, and in a lawsuit against the social media, against Facebook, against Twitter. And this is how I end my book. Because the new kind of terrorism is the lone wolf. It's what we see as random attacks, stabbing attacks, that are occurring with no financial support, but with a tremendous support that comes from the social media. As a matter of fact, all these posts that we see that call to kill Israelis or to stab Jews became so effective that 40 people got killed in the recent wave of terrorism and many, many others got injured. And it's all done on Facebook because Facebook is the most popular social media network among the Palestinians, to the extent that Prime Minister Netanyahu called this wave of terrorism the Facebook Intifada. And then he urges ministers to meet with Facebook officials and to urge them to turn this incitement down, to take down all these videos that illustrating how to kill and where to stab the knife or how to twist the knife and what poison to put on the knife before you go and stab. And all this endorsement to terrorism going on after one carries out a knife and kills Jews. But Facebook refused. Facebook said they are a neutral bulletin board. They are not involved with their users. They are not involved with their content. They are not taking any position in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So we decided to sue Facebook. And to do that, in order to overcome the standing issue, we wanted to get as many plaintiffs as possible. So we launched a campaign. We called everybody who wants to file this lawsuit to join us. Within 3 days, we got 20,000 Israelis to join the lawsuit. We ran the campaign on our Facebook page. And we filed an injunction against Facebook in New York. The injunction was twofold. One, that Facebook will take down the incitement. But the second, that Facebook will be proactive. That they will work, they will monitor this incitement, they will take it down. Don't wait until the community alert you for this. And we claim that Facebook has the algorithm, they have the tool to do it. Same way Facebook knows what type of coffee I drink in the morning, they can detect these deadly words and take them down. Facebook filed a motion to dismiss. They claim they were immune according to the Communication Decency Act. This is a law from 1996 that keeps the internet open. It grants blanket immunity to social media platforms. So we find our response, and we say that this sort of words cause a clear and imminent danger should not be protected by freedom of speech. Congress didn't really envision this sort of words that cause people to go and kill. We also say that Facebook is not a neutral bulletin board. They are involved with their users and the content. They connect between those who incite to kill to those who eventually go and do it. And we proved on an experiment that Facebook takes a position in the conflict. We opened 2 pages, one that called to kill Israelis, one that called to kill Palestinians. We posted identical posts with identical images, just with one difference. And after 2 days, we asked Facebook to take down both pages. Facebook immediately took down the page that calls to kill Palestinians and sent us a fair message saying that they checked the page and it does not fit their community standards. But they let the Israeli page stand and they sent us a message saying that they checked the page and it does not violate their community standards. But we know we had a problem. The Communication Decency Act is an absolute law. There are no exceptions whatsoever for content. So we're looking to see if there is something that Facebook could not be immune from. And we found it. It's aiding and abetting terrorism. In the United States, no American company is allowed to provide any sort of services to a designated terror organization. A bank is not allowed to open bank account to Ismail Haniyeh or to Hamas or to Islamic Jihad. If you provide any sort of services to a designated terror organization, you are violating the Anti-Terrorism Act, and you will be found liable civilly and criminally. This means, from our perspective, monetary lawsuit. So we went and gathered 5 families that lost their loved ones in the most recent attacks in Israel and filed a lawsuit against Facebook in New York for $1 billion. One of the families is the family of Taylor Force, a U.S. veteran, fought in Afghanistan and United States, in Iraq. He went to business school. He took a trip to Israel in the course of his school. In the second day in Israel, he was walking on Jaffa port and got stabbed to death. One of them is the family of Richard Lakin, a human rights activist, one that believed in coexistence, took a bus in Jerusalem, and then 2 members of the Hamas boarded the bus, shut down the door behind them, and started shooting towards all the passengers. They injured Richard. They did not kill him, so they took a knife and finished the job. One of them is the family of Hallel Yafe. Hallel was a beautiful girl, blonde hair, blue eyes, an excellent student, a great ballet dancer. She was also 13 years old. And one night she had a performance in her community, Kiryat Arba. She went with her parents, she danced, they had a competition, she won, and at the end of the night, they went back home to sleep. She didn't have school the next day. So she stayed in bed when her parents left to work. And then a terrorist from the nearby village entered the community. He did not do it through the front gate. He made a cut in the fence that alerted the security services. They came riding on their jeep looking for the one who infiltrated the community. They did not find him. He was hiding behind a bush. Went and drove away. He got up. He went to the first house he saw. He tried to open the door was locked, so he went through the window. He wound up in Hallel's room. He was holding a knife, and he stabbed her 17 times in her bed until she died. He was 15 years old. He had a Facebook page where before he went to stab, he wrote, "Death is a right, and I deserve this right." We will not let them kill our children and keep silent. We will fight them back. We will not let Facebook sit in their ivory towers in Palo Alto when the blood is spilled on the street of Jerusalem. We have to find Facebook accountable. We have to teach them that as a social media, they have social responsibility and they must take this incitement down because words can really kill. This is the story of Harpoon. This is the story of Shurat Adin. Every day we get more calls from more and more terror victims who want to fight back, who are seeking justice. Every day we have the state of Israel facing more and more challenges that the only answer for them is in the legal theater. War crime allegations against the IDF soldiers, a new flotilla that's coming in, and there is no end. But we are dedicated to help. We established Shurat Adin to take all these hundreds of cases and file them in an orderly manner in the courts around the world. We will fight terrorism in court because we do what the Israeli government cannot do. This is why they're reaching out to us. The Israeli government has constraints, they have foreign relations they have to take into consideration, they have international treaties that are signed off, they have to be politically correct. We don't. We are a private organization that represents private people that have one goal: to bankrupt terrorism, one lawsuit at a time. And we will fight terrorism in court because we don't have any other choice. We live in Israel. We want to send our kids to school and make sure they're coming back safe. We want to ride our buses, to shop in our malls, to sit in our cafes. We want to live safely in our country. And this is our country and the only one. Take any step we can and use any tool we have and fight in any front available to make sure that we are fighting, we are living safely in our country. It's a fight, it's a struggle. We're fighting for our survival, but in the end, we will win. The Torah told us, "Lo ta'amod al dam ra'echa." We cannot stand idly by our brother's blood. We cannot afford it. The state of Israel cannot afford it. The Western world cannot afford it. None of us can afford it. Thank you very much.
Panelists up, please. The panelists can come make their way to the seating area. And while they do, hi everyone, my name is Rachel Weiser. I'm proud to be one of the lawyers at Shurat Adin. I want to take a moment to just thank the Bacon Center for hosting this event and Paul Gross of the Bacon Center who helped us to make all of the arrangements. The way this is going to work is that I'm going to introduce each of our panelists to you. Each of them will have about 5 minutes to make some introductory remarks, and then we'll move on to some questions and answers by me to the panelists. So we will start, I'm going to go sit down actually. I'm going to start with General Yossi Kuperwasser. Brigadier General Yossi Kuperwasser is an Israeli intelligence and security expert. Formerly, General Kuperwasser served as the head of the research division in the IDF Military Intelligence Division and Director General of the Israel Ministry of Strategic Affairs. I introduce to you General Yossi Kuperwasser.
Thank you, Nitsana, for the great work. I can also mention Avi. He's always behind the scene. Fighting the financing of terrorism is a critical matter. And as fighting terrorism is a very holistic, needs a very holistic approach, while you have to develop iron domes, you also have to develop all kinds of financial iron domes. And what Shuhat Adin does is a part of this iron dome, and this is why it should be so highly appreciated for everything they've done in the last 15 years or something like that, right? I started my share in fighting financing of terrorism back in '94, when the person who later was the one playing one of the most key roles in Harpoon came to me. I was then under 3 in the research division, and told me about things he saw in the Judea and Samaria area where he was stationed at the time, and how the issue of the money flowing into the terror organizations is affecting their capabilities. So when I saw that, I initiated the system according to which the intelligence in Israel has outlawed all the organizations that were involved in delivering money from abroad to Israel and getting the money in Israel. And through the years, we did it systematically, and we still do it from time to time because they changed their identity. But once we declare such an organization as a terror supporting organization, they are outlawed and they cannot operate. It's an ongoing effort that started over there. And later on, I played a role together with this guy, Dagan, who was a very good friend of mine, in establishing Harpoon. Dagan was at the time, as you said, the advisor for counterterrorism for the Prime Minister. And we were together in this business, took part in the activities of Harpoon in the beginning, and later on in all kinds of ways. And I cannot speak about here. But there was a lot of logic behind it, and it became pretty successful. Years later, based on those outlawing practice, I found myself in a very peculiar way as the main witness in the most important lawsuit that was filed according to this line of thinking. This was against the leader of the the northern part of the Muslim movement in Israel, Sheikh Salah, from Al-Fahd. And what Sheikh Salah did was taking money from outlawed organizations belonging to Hamas in the outside of Israel, mainly in Europe, and delivering them to organizations belonging to Hamas inside, like Noor, for example, organizations that belong to Hamas inside the territory. Since both of them were outlawed, anything he did in this respect was against the law. So I want just to take my last minute to tell you about the decisive moment in this lawsuit. I spent 7 days as a witness. It was unbelievable. And later on, Nitsana knows I was a witness also in one of her main cases too. And but this was 7 endless days, and the lawyer that was representing Salah was a very famous lawyer, Victor Feldman. Those of you know him. Many of you probably know him. And I presented an affidavit that was 1,000 pages long. It was unbelievable. For 7 days last week. And page 166, it's written that a Dutch organization said this and that. Do you have it in the original? And I had to study Dutch, you know, to answer. And but on the last day, he came to me and he brought with him a pack of booklets issued by the organizations of Hamas around the world. And he says to me, listen, Mr. Kupovasa, I was in uniform. He still called me Mr. Kupovasa. Listen, Mr. Kupovasa, he says to me, you know everything. You sit in your office, all the information comes into your computer. You read your computer. You know everything. But my humble client, he doesn't have a computer. He doesn't know anything. How should he know that this organization or that organization belongs to Hamas? How can he know that? Listen, these booklets are the only thing he has. Are you familiar with these booklets? Some of them I have. Some of them I read from time to time, not all of them. Can you tell me how can he deduct from these booklets that these organizations belong to Hamas? So, I said, listen, first of all, I must tell you, these organizations make a very big effort to hide their real identity. So I can understand that when you're saying that it's difficult to know only from the booklets, but that's why we have already outlawed these organizations. You should just read the decrees coming from the government saying that this is an outlawed organization. But you know what? Let me open these booklets and maybe I can help your client, your humble client. So I just opened the first one. It's a booklet issued by an organization called Sanab al-Aqsa. Sanab al-Aqsa is the Al-Aqsa wheat flour. And I take this booklet and I open the booklet on the back side of the opening of the cover, back side of the cover, and the page, the first page, there's a huge picture of a delegation from Sanab al-Aqsa who give a symbolic money order, check, to an organization in Gaza. And it says Sanab al-Aqsa delivers money, or delivers the money order to Al-Jam'iyya al-Islamiyya, which is the Islamic Brotherhood organization, Islamic organization in Gaza. So I said to him, listen, I didn't know it's going to be that easy, but Jam'iyya al-Islamiyya is the mother of Hamas. Because Sheikh Yassin was the head of Jam'iyya al-Islamiyya, and from the Jam'iyya al-Islamiyya created the Hamas. So obviously, everybody who opens it, don't tell me that your humble client doesn't know who's Jam'iyya al-Islamiyya. And then I tell him, listen, just beyond that, look at what's written on the wall behind this big picture. And the white on the one side here, you see the word stishhad. Means something with istishhad, the will to die in the name of Allah. But on that side I tell him, you see here the beginning of a verse from the Quran. The beginning is وَلَا تَحْسَبْ. All you see is وَلَا تَحْسَبْ. I told him, listen, this is verse number 169 in the third surah of the Quran, third chapter of the Quran. It says وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بِأَنَّهُمْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِندَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. Which means, don't consider those who die in the name of Allah dead, because they are alive and Allah takes care of them. Now this verse is used by all terror organizations as the encouragement and justification for carrying out suicide terror attacks, or any terror attacks, because you can die not only in a suicide terror attack. So this is the verse that justifies terrorism. So Sheikh Rai, from his chair and says, "How can you, a non-Muslim, speak about the Quran?" So I told him, "Listen, Sheikh Rai, don't jump. Because the problem here is with you guys, Muslims, that you took a verse that came down from Allah to Prophet Muhammad and was about encouraging the people of Medina to go for an ordinary war, the Uhud war. And you took it and totally twisted it in order to justify the killing of people who are innocent. Whereas the Quran is basically against it." So he jumped and started shouting and said, "We never heard and we never read about a sheikh named Kupperwasser." Just like you did, everybody in the room started laughing. It was packed with people from Al-Fakhr. And everybody started laughing. And the result was that Raed Salah spent 2.5 years in jail.
I was told that I would be remiss not to mention that this week's Parsha quiz, talks about the spies who were sent to Israel to scope out the land, and so obviously this panel is very appropriate. And with that, I'll introduce our next speaker, who I can only introduce as Uzi. Really. Uzi is a financial warfare expert, and that is really all I can say about him. Uzi. Okay, Uzi is deferring. We're going to come back to you though. Watch carefully, sometimes he just disappears. Yossi Melman is an Israeli journalist, writer, and filmmaker specializing in security and intelligence affairs. He has written 10 books on the subject, including one which is a New York Times bestseller was a New York Times bestseller for 3 months, and created 2 documentaries. Both were nominated for Israeli and US Oscar awards. Please welcome Yossi Melman.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here this evening. First of all, let me express my congratulations for Nitsana's wonderful and thrilling book. I did read it, and I think it is very impressive work of research and deep, penetrating, analytical outlook on a very, very important topic, and a topic which is not very well known. Although the dictum, the saying, "follow the money," is a very old one. Nevertheless, and unfortunately, Israel and its intelligence community came to understand and realize the importance of follow the money at a very late stage. Only 20 years ago, 22 years ago, it was the brainchild indeed of Meir Dagan and a few other people. I met Meir Dagan when I was a simple soldier in the military, in the IDF. Well, it was in Gaza in the late 60s, early 70s. I was a corporal and then a sergeant, and Meir Dagan was already I think a captain. When he was involved when we were involved in fighting Palestinian terrorists that were almost daily killing Israelis, collaborators, in the streets, in the alleys of Gaza and the refugee camps. And then in the 90s, I met him again. I was already a journalist, a writer, and he was the head, as Nitsana said earlier, and Yossi also mentioned it, he was the head of the small unit in charge of counterterrorism. To tell you, to be frank with you, it was not very important organization. Actually, it was created as a default. No, the intelligence community, the Israeli intelligence community, the military intelligence, and the Mossad, and the Shin Bet really did not appreciate it, and even refused to collaborate and cooperate with this unit, which was sitting in a very small office with 4 or 5 rooms in the Kiryat in Tel Aviv, in the Prime Minister's office, in a small. These buildings are now restaurants. Probably you visited some of them in the Sharona market. But that was the original seat of the first Israeli Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion. And Mayor Dagan and his people were sitting there. They were representing the various agencies of the Israeli intelligence community, but actually the intelligence community did not want them and did not share with them, were very reluctant to share with them information. And Mayor Dagan was thinking and thinking and thinking because he had a lot of time to thinking, because he was a man in action, and suddenly he found himself doing basically nothing, a little bit of paperwork, and that's it. And then he came with this tremendous, wonderful idea of follow the money. He realized that there is a loophole, that this issue, this important issue of trying to drain the swamp, the financial swamp of terrorist organizations, no one is taking care of it, and it's not very important. And you need a task force, and you need a collaborative effort by the intelligence community, but also the financial system, the bank, the Central Bank of Israel, and that's how he began the idea of taking advantage of what was missing, because no one else, neither the Shin Bet, the domestic security service, nor the Mossad, and not even the military intelligence had the time, resources to deal with the issue. And then, when he became the head of the Mossad 5-6 years later, he created that unit, which Nitsana wrote a book about it. 2 final remarks. Follow the money and fighting financial terrorism is a very heroic effort, but it also is an Herculean effort. It's not easy, because the money is being concealed between walls and walls and walls, not just in banks, but also in other institutions. And also it's a very complicated issue for the state. I can give you 2 examples, and that will bring us up to date. On one hand, Hamas is supported by Iran. Iran is one of the major funding forces behind Hamas. Probably around Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. Probably $100 million a year, which are smuggled into Gaza, mainly Gaza and also to the West Bank. But it goes in a very circumvent way. The money might be coming from Turkey, which is recently becoming a very important hub for Hamas front command post. And then, to see the complexity of the issue, let's look at Qatar. On one hand, Qatar is a tiny country. It's a country which has a huge television network. That's how I describe it. And that was the reason why they created Al Jazeera, to be an important player on Arab affairs, Middle Eastern affairs, and on the world stage. So on one hand, they are friends of America. There is a military base in Qatar, frequented by US military base. On the other hand, they are behind or financially supporting notions of the Muslim Brotherhood, which Hamas is also an extension of Muslim Brotherhood. So Israel had a delegation in Qatar, a diplomatic delegation for many, many years. Israel contemplated 15 years ago to buy gas from Qatar. So on one hand, Qatar is very friendly with the United States. On the other hand, it wants to have good relations with Israel, but also they support Hamas. Now the Israeli dilemma nowadays is, if we want to use and it's a really serious dilemma, if we want to use the Hamas money for the humanitarian aid provided by Hamas to the poor people of Gaza, the 2 million people of Gaza, then the situation there would further deteriorate. On the other hand, if we allowed Qatar to bring money into Gaza, a big chunk of it will go to Hamas to build the underground tunnels, to build workshops and to produce missiles. So it's not a simple linear kind of approach which you can take when it comes to financing terrorism, when it comes to supporting terrorists from the financial perspective. And especially it's not easy for a state and a government. That's why sometimes states need private organizations, as Nitsana said, in order to do things and to execute action which governments and states cannot do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. And Uzi, now I turn the microphone over to you.
I want to speak about something that was mentioned in Nitsana's words, but not by my colleagues over here. After the success of fighting terror financing, the name of the unit was changed. The name was changed to financial warfare, because the results of that unit proved that we are not speaking or discussing a tactical tool, but we are speaking on a strategic tool which will be one of the pillars that the state of Israel can fight not only against terror, but also against enemies who are jeopardizing our security. And at that time, the idea of financial warfare against the Iranian raised. I had the honor to be at those preliminary stages, and there was a kind of a mistrust globe-wide regarding the influence of financial pressure on countries. Mayor Dagan at that time was really sure that finding ways to press financially the Iranians would be one of the most important pillars in order to fight their nuclear program. Oh, many few believed in it, but the process started. The process started, and together with very good colleagues from the United States, we wandered globe-wide, convincing mainly financial institutions, commercial companies, pension funds, to initiate or to stop their financial relations with the Iranians. At that time, the word sanctions wasn't something that was on the table. I'm speaking at the beginning of 2000, 2002, 2003. But with the time, more and more believe in this tool as a pressure tool that at the end of the day will bring the Iranians to a conclusion that they have to negotiate their nuclear program. Coming to the days before the agreement that was reached, the nuclear agreement, the concept that was initiated by Meir Dagan proved itself. At the end of the day, because of the financial pressure that was pushed by the US and afterwards the European countries and other countries who joined it, the Iranians came to the table. Now, we can argue or not argue if the nuclear agreement is a good agreement or a bad agreement, but at the end of the day, they reached the table. Now we see this financial warfare also initiated towards North Korea and again towards the Iranians. So not only terror financing or fighting terror financing is the legacy of late Meir Dagan. I think the word strategy of financial warfare is one of his biggest legacies.
Okay, so I have to share with all of you that I have the great honor of, as you know, as I said, being a lawyer at Sharetta Din, which means that little Rachel Weiser from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania gets to help bring lawsuits against some of the biggest, baddest organizations and people in the world. It also means that I get to sit with a panel like this and boss people like this around, which you only get to do if you sit here. So I'm going to ask each of you questions, or I may ask questions for all of you, and I'm just going to really, really ask that you limit your answers to just a few minutes, because I know you all have so much to say about all of this and could probably speak for days and days. So we're going to give really short answers. So the first question that actually I think probably all of you could answer, I'll start with Nitsana, but afterwards anybody else who wants to pipe in. We know that this innovative idea that the late Meir Dagan started about going after terror financing was very, very effective. And my question is, how does it apply today? In fighting terrorism today, is it as effective? Is it used the same way? What are your thoughts on fighting terrorism through finance today?
Want me to be frank? I think one of the reasons that I'm here, and I think that one of the reasons Sharetta Din is doing what is doing, is that after the death of Meir Dagan, my feeling is that we have, as private entities, to fulfill his legacy. Unfortunately, terror entities and countries found ways to bypass all the regulations, all the rules, all the tactics that were used in the past, and use new ones. And there is nobody who really fights that. The banks in Lebanon are transferring hundreds of millions of US dollars from Iran to Hezbollah through American banks. They don't use designated organizations, they don't use designated names. That's yesterday's war. there is new war, new tactics. And I think Nitsana and Shurat ad-Din did a nice small operation, which normally intelligence organizations are doing. It combines the social media and the financial system. They found out in a Facebook site about contribution to Hezbollah. They found a very sophisticated way, first to create contact through this Facebook site, then use a telephone call from a country, it was in Europe, wasn't it? In Europe, to call Lebanon and ask them how to donate money to Hezbollah, and they got an answer. Very simple. And I think it was Western Union. I think it was Western Union. They even got the name that the money should be transferred. The second time, they asked how to transfer money to a bank account. And they got the name of a private civilian. When he was checked, again, not through intelligence channels, this private entity was the father of 2 Hezbollah martyrs. We checked it through Google. And he had a bank account. And they asked to donate to this bank account. Why I'm giving those examples? Because I give those examples to let you understand that we can applaud ourselves for what was, like we say, was. But we have to aim towards the future, and there is a lot of work to be done.
Yes, indeed, there is plenty of work to get done. We're working now in Shurat ad-Din of filing new lawsuits against what you, Yossi, mentioned, the Qatari banks and the Turkish banks. And we are totally aware of the dilemma of the Israeli government when it comes to Qatar. We know that Qatar basically holds and keeps the strip going with the funds that they are transferring to the hands of the people there, but not monitoring where it's really going, if it's going to the Hamas government or it's going to the population itself, and this is a problem. We know about foundations that belong to the kingdom and the royal family in Qatar that fund the charities that belong to Hamas, the charities that are from charities of Hamas, and this is pure fighting terrorism. We're going to file a lawsuit against them. We also found a charity in Turkey that funds the front organizations of Hamas in Gaza. We are going after them as well. Because the war against terror financing cannot stop. We see, for instance, the payments to the prisoners who are sitting in the Israeli jail. They're not only encouraging others to go and carry out the tax, because the money they will receive in jail, they don't dream to get in their lifetime. And we have evidence for this. But the money that they are receiving actually is getting used to go and support new terror attacks. We have evidence, we have interrogations of terrorists that are sitting in jail that go and say that yes, we were asked to take the money from the casino, or take the money that the PA is paying us as a compensation to go and buy rifles, to go and buy cars, to go and buy other ammunition that we need to carry out attacks. We learned it long ago that money drives everything, money drives terrorism as well.
Well, picture that is what Uzi said. I think that the fight against the financing of terrorism is not only in the hands of private organizations, although private organizations play a very important role. But we are living in a different time. In the past, the United States was giving money to the terrorists, so the Iranians. And we all saw what happened in the context of the JCPOA. $1.7 billion were given to the Iranians in cash. That was a crazy situation. But now we're in a little bit different situation. I recommend you to Google and look for the speech given yesterday by a lady by the name of Sigal Mandelker in the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies in Washington just yesterday, in which she explained what are the steps taken by the administration in order to fight against Iranian activities on the financial level. It's a new ballgame. There's much more determination. This is why Peugeot and Citroën and everybody else leaves the Iranian market. And by the way, don't have too high hopes to get money from Boeing, because I guess this deal is going to be cancelled as well. So it's a new situation. In the context of the Palestinian issue, for example, the tool that became relevant in this respect is the legislation in Congress. Nitsana mentioned here before the Taylor Force story. There's the Taylor Force Act that was approved by Congress unanimously. Both Democrats and Republicans voted for it. And it became into a law just recently, and it means the United States is not going to pay to give any assistance to the Palestinian Authority as long as it sticks to the law that says that they pay salaries to the terrorists sitting in Israeli jails just because they are the fighting sector, as they call it in the law. They are the fighting sector of the Palestinian people. And this is a major change, and it's going to happen hopefully in Israel too. The funny thing is that whereas in the United States, this is one of the only laws that deal with foreign policy that does not have a waiver in it. The President, the State Department cannot say, because of all kinds of national security considerations, they prefer to pay salaries to people who kill Israelis. In Israel, there is a similar law which does have a waiver. And there's a fight now in the Foreign Affairs and the Security Committee, or Defense Committee, let's call it, in the Knesset, where the members of the committee refuse to accept the law coming from the Ministry of Defense that has this waiver. They depend that this waiver is going to be taken away from them. And, but this is a major step, because if the Palestinians are pushed to the wall and have to decide if they want to have money for everything they need, or to keep paying salaries to terrorists, then one of two things may happen. Either they prefer to expose their real nature as an entity that supports terrorism, or they prefer to have a better life. I'm afraid they're going to choose the first option. But at least we'll know with whom we're dealing. And that's the major thing that's happening in this respect. And I'm proud to be the person who wrote the basic paper upon which the Taylor Force Act was approved, and upon which we
Thank you, General. Yossi, do you have something to add on this subtopic?
I would be very brief. The answer is yes, the fight is effective, but on the other hand, we have to be realistic. Financial pressure brought governments over the knees, whether it was the apartheid regime in South Africa, the Iranians who came to negotiate the nuclear deal, or Kim Jong-un. And Libya, yes, Libya in 2004 succumbed to the pressure and had a deal with the US and the UK. But on the other hand, they are not going to give up easily their ideologies. So sometimes if they come to the table, whether it's a terrorist organization or a government, they will negotiate a compromise just to win time. And when the pressure is relieved, then they will continue with their basic ideology and their goals.
Thank you. I think we have time for one short question for each of you. So I'll ask each of you again to please limit your time. But I'll start, Yossi, since we just ended with you, I'll start with you. Perfect. I'm very curious, I'm sure a lot of people here are, about how you balance issues of national security and intelligence with being in the media and wanting to run a story that could potentially compromise national security. What are the tensions that you face covering these issues, and can you give everybody perhaps an example?
Well, it sounds like a difficult question for a journalist, but for me it's very easy. I know my limits. In Israel there is a censorship on top of that, but I don't rely that my stories will be censored, and I know how to censor myself in the sense that when I think that I would compromise very important issues, then I simply don't write it. And I can give you at least one short example. In '85 there was a military, there was a coup d'etat or change of government in Sudan around the time that Israel was lifting the Ethiopian Jews from Sudan. The leader of Sudan, General Numeri, who was toppled by popular revolt, was working closely with Israel and allowed this lifting of the Ethiopian Jews. Then he was replaced by a guy who was called Sidki al-Mahdi. Now Sidki al-Mahdi, I learned from sources, from talking to people, was kind of a, when he was young, in the 50s, he was kind of an agent or helper, or was in touch with Israel when he was a student in London. So when he became a prime minister, I could have mentioned it, no one would have stopped me, that 30 years earlier, he was working or approaching the Israeli embassy in London, meeting with Israeli diplomats and so on, asking for help. And I decided that I would not mention it, because I didn't know, maybe he was still on some cordial terms with Israel. So for me it's an easy answer.
Thank you. Okay, we'll just move our way down. General Cooperwasser, do you think that advancements in technology have made it harder to gather intelligence today? And have the terrorist organizations gotten smarter or better at protecting themselves from being the subjects of intelligence gathering?
Intelligence and business, specifically of financing terror, it's an ongoing, never-ending battle of learning. The other side is learning very fast and adapt themselves to the changing situation all the time. And yes, they take advantage extremely well of all the opportunities given to them by the advanced internet capability. They are working very hard on the darknet, which provides them with the ability to do all kinds of business that is illegal. They are using all the options that are of encryption that are there with everything that they use. Tehran or whatever. And they are definitely enjoying the fact that the modern world has provided terrorists and criminals of other kinds the ability to have secure communication. And you saw in the United States, in some of the cases, how difficult it was for the American intelligence community to somehow know what was happening in the phone belonging to a terrorist. So it's, yes, we are facing a very difficult job, but the intelligence community is also learning. So, as I said, it's a race between two groups that are learning, and sometimes we learn faster, and sometimes we learn slower. And there's no guarantee that we should always learn faster. Look just at what's happening right now with the issue of the kites. It's again another part of this ongoing battle of learning. We should catch up. But it's difficult, even though this looks something so simple and so archaic. Nevertheless, it's not easy to find a solution. So we are, the big thing is to be able to be one step ahead. And that's the real challenge in intelligence, to be one step ahead of your enemy. Sometimes, not, well, if you look, for example, at what's happening between us and the Iranians right now, we are, for quite a while now, a step ahead of them, which frustrates them and drives them crazy. But it's not always like that. You have to always be on the tip of your toes to make sure that you are ahead of your adversary.
Okay, Nitsana, have the laws changed over the years since you started Shuragadin as they relate to filing lawsuits to fight terror financing? Is it harder now than it was when you started? And have these changes made the tactics that you describe in your book harder to carry out today?
Well, the law hasn't changed. But unfortunately, its interpretation by the courts has changed. And that limits the ability of the law to catch and to allow us to litigate these cases. And I can just give an example of the famous judgment that we received on behalf of 10 families of terror victims in a lawsuit they filed against the PA and the PLO in 2004. Major terror attacks during the Intifada that were perpetrated by Palestinian policemen and Palestinian security guards. And therefore there was a strict liability on the Palestinian Authority that sent them and encouraged them and gave them the orders to go and carry out the attacks, and kept paying their salary when they were sitting in the Israeli jail, promoting them in rank and giving compensation to the families of the suicide bombers. So we were able to prove liability in court, and we convinced the jury to find the PA and the PLO responsible for this act of terrorism, and they gave us a judgment in January 2015 at the end of the trial for $655 million. But then the Palestinian Authority filed an appeal and said that they are, this judgment should be vacant because there is no personal jurisdiction. Personal jurisdiction is if you are present in the United States, or you have business in the United States, or you have any sort of representation, or you have any sort of offices. The Palestinian Authority came and said, we have none of this. And therefore, according to the US Constitution, we are entitled to due process, and we cannot be under this law in the United States. And the Courts of Appeals agreed with the Palestinian Authority and vacated the judgment. We went to the Supreme Court. And in the Supreme Court, we came and said, look, it's an issue. It's a clash between Congress to the court. Because Congress was the one who legislated this law. The Anti-Terrorism Act was legislated in 1996 in order to bring terror organizations that are responsible for terror attacks that happen abroad outside of the United States into a court in the United States. It was a deliberately extraterritorial jurisdiction law. This is what Congress wanted. Congress was very outraged when people, American citizens getting killed, and there is nobody to bring to justice in the United States. So they legislated this law. But now the court comes and says it's unconstitutional because these organizations, terror organizations, are entitled to due process. To this I must add that the Supreme Court, before considering issuing a writ, approached the State Department to get a position. Now we had this position of the State Department before under the Obama administration, that they were talking about personal jurisdiction, but the court approached the new State Department knowing that there is a new pharaoh that didn't know Joseph and perhaps they changed their mind, but they hadn't. Even the State Department went and stood against this law when it comes to personal jurisdiction. So now if we are able to sue terror organizations outside of the United States, we cannot do it anymore, and it certainly limits our ability. This judgment, I can just end and say that although it was vacated, we are back in Congress to make them get the terror victims paid. We're going to work in the Congress, we're going to work with senators to make sure that the PA will pay this judgment to the terror victims.
Okay, Uzi. In the book, there is a story told about the war in Gaza in 2014, where Israel's intelligence services disrupted the delivery of a vital $13 million in cash. And that disruption ended up making Hamas no longer be able to afford the war, and within 48 hours there was a ceasefire. Now, I was living here in Israel at the time. I clearly remember every minute. I remember every minute of the 18 days we were searching for those boys. I remember every minute of the war. I had a nephew blowing up tunnels in Handasa, Kravi, and Gaza. I do not remember ever hearing anything about $13 million of cash being blown up by Israel. So my question to you is, did this really happen? And did it really end the war? And why are we only hearing about it now?
I read it in a book. I really don't know if it happened. I don't know if it happened, but I saw some picture. I think it was a picture of some dollars. Yeah, but I want really to add to Nitsana's comments because I think it's very important. It's very important for the issue. Yossi mentioned the Taylor Force law in the Congress and the upcoming law here in Israel, the Knesset, which I really salute and admire. On the other hand, meanwhile, all the salaries and benefits for the arrested terrorists are passing through our Israeli banks because they are paid in shekels. And the banks understood that. Now, they weren't afraid from the government. They were afraid from this lady here. because they rushed to the Ministry of Treasury here and asked for immunity, which, to my best of my knowledge, was considered positive in order that the state will give immunity to Israeli banks who are trading with Palestinian banks. So, going back to what I said, yes, I think we are stepping a little bit backwards, because there are simple moves that the state of Israel can take in order to stop it. We can put the entity that sends the money, that is not part of the Palestinian Authority anymore, those blacklisted of the Ministry of Defense. Okay, but you can put it in, they can put it in the blacklist, and the minute they are blacklisted by the Ministry of Defense, which is a very simple move, no money can be transferred, no laws are needed. So yes, in one hand, maybe in the States it's less effective. On the other hand, in Israel, it is still effective.
Okay, we have time for just one or two quick questions. This is always the dangerous part, and really I'm a little frightened. But we really only have time for one or two questions, and they must be a question. I can't stress this enough. Please, please, please don't make a statement. Your question must start with why, what, where, when, how. Go ahead.
There's a bike on the way.
Thank you. I was in the U.S. in 9/11. I saw thousands of people die in that event. And that was a relatively inexpensive event. And skip forward to today, and I see 20 shekels or less being invested in a kite. And so we see terrorism actually moving away from the high-ticket items that your financial statement is. The question is relatively inexpensive terrorism moving out from under your ability to affect it, or will you be able to address that as well through financial means? Do we have a new form of terrorism that eludes the activities that you're engaged in?
Well, it doesn't. It makes it more difficult, as I mentioned before. It makes it more difficult to take care of it. But it's not that it really eludes our ability, because in the end of the day, even if in the spearhead you have somebody who flies a kite, there's a system behind it. And this system costs money. And in order to support it, you have to be able to raise the money and deliver the funds to them. And because of that, even if the end tool is so cheap, the system is based on financial support system, and you should look for that in this respect. And, we can do that. And listen, many of the activities are either financed by Hamas itself, and they have to pay money for the people to come to the area of the fence, and they hire the cars that bring them there, and they give them money. It's a full system that costs a lot of money. Don't think that the march of return, as they call it, is a cheap operation. It's not a cheap operation. To bring 60,000 people on, let's say, on the day of May 14th, cost them a lot of money. And if you're able to fight against that, you can have an impact even with the money of $13 million. If they do them up, is a big loss. Talking about the kites themselves, you're right. It's the same logic of the rockets. Instead, in order to intercept a rocket that costs a very small amount of money, you have to come up with the Iron Dome that costs who knows how many times more. And, but still, you do that because fighting terror, you don't act according only to financial consideration. And, we need to provide security, and even if it costs a lot of money, we do it. And I guess that we should find a way to stop the flow of money for these operations in Gaza as well. At the end of the day, we'll find something and they will die somehow.
Kites.
No, the kites, I don't know. By the way, somebody told me that the kites were provided by Japan. Which is
Thank you. You might have mentioned it already, but I was wondering, where does Hamas, where were the three major contributors money to Hamas for him to be able to pay for all this
They have several sources. Hamas, as such, is a part of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood has a lot of branches around the world, and all of them raised zakat money from the Muslims all over the world. And this money is channeled to Hamas through, I don't like this term, charities, because this portrays them in these are Hamas organizations disguised as charity. And this operation brings a lot of money to Hamas. On top of that, they have, and this is the funds of their own. On top of that, they have the money they get from Qatar. There's a lot of money they get from Iran, as Nitsana mentioned. There's money coming from Turkey, because Turkey too is run by a Muslim Brotherhood version, Turkish version of the Muslim Brotherhood. I think Nitsana mentioned it before. It's several hundred thousands of millions of dollars. Several hundred millions of dollars, sorry. Several hundred millions of dollars. I think Nitsana mentioned 500, yes, a year.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, but we're going to wrap up. We're running late. I want to thank all of our panelists so much. And I just take this opportunity before everybody leaves to just say two very quick things. One is, three things. One is, of course, to thank our panelists for their time tonight. We really enjoyed hearing them. You're experts on this topic, obviously. Second of all, I just want to point out that everybody received on their seat a pamphlet about Shurat, so you can learn more about it. I encourage you to come to our website, to get involved, to help us in this fight. We need your help. And third, I want to just tell you very quickly about a campaign that we're running right now. We are going to be bringing war crimes complaints in the International Criminal Court against Hamas. On behalf of our farmers, on behalf of our soldiers, on behalf of our citizens who are now fighting this newest wave that we've all been watching and dealing with, and also to bring out the truth, to tell the world what's really happening, because what they're seeing in the news is obviously not what's really happening. We have a petition that if you go to our Facebook page, you can sign. Please sign it. We want to go to the International Criminal Court with 100,000 signatures. This issue is important. It needs the weight of a lot of people standing behind it, so that our soldiers aren't the ones that are accused of war crimes, but the real war criminals are the ones who are put on trial. So, thank you